Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at Book Blather. If you're new here, I'm Dave. This is Olive, and we mostly talk about books, though we occasionally do talk about other things. And one of those things that we occasionally talk about now is films, when we come across one that is particularly worth talking about. So that's what we want to do today. Today we're going to this is a start of another series. It's just a three-part series. But this is a series that is going to talk about a series of films by this Danish director, written and directed by this Danish director Lars von Trier, called the Depression Trilogy. It's not they're not officially styled that, and the movies are not connected in any way, other than that they all star the same actress, Charlotte Gainsbourg, who is phenomenal in all of the movies. But they're not connected. That's just how Von Trier just refers to them as the Depression Trilogy. And these movies are the type that I thought were worth talking about, because these movies are the type of, I wouldn't say any of these films are movies that are like one of the best movies that I've ever seen. Okay. But to me, that's not necessarily the hallmark of a quality movie. A lot of the movies that I see, even ones that are great fun, I watch them, I have a good time, and then a couple days later, I pretty much forget about them. But every now and then, you come along a movie where even if it wasn't one of the best films that you've ever seen, it sticks with you, right? And it really has an impact on you, and weeks later, you're still thinking about it, and you just can't stop thinking about this film. And so those to me are very high quality films that are usually worth talking about. And so this set of films, this Depression Trilogy, is of that style. And they're called the Depression Trilogy because each of these movies, they deal with some very, very intense form of depression. The depression it has different sources, and it manifests in different ways. But each of these movies is really extremely powerful and very impactful and emotionally wrenching. They have different degrees of aggression and violence, different levels of sexual intensity to them. And they all have some artistry to them, and they're movies that really, really have an impact on you, or at least they did for me. So the first one that I wanted to talk about today is the movie that kind of introduced me to this trilogy that I didn't know anything about, and that is Antichrist. So this movie came out in 2009. It starred Charlotte Gainsbourg and also William Dafoe. And the whole movie was about just this couple. And this movie, I had no idea what I was getting into. I was introduced to this just because I had saved that movie in my letterbox queue, along with a couple dozen other horror movies as just a potential watch. I thought it was about a couple that goes to a cabin in the woods and weird supernatural things happen. It was absolutely not that. It was not that. This movie was, I was very surprised and very shocked when I ended up watching this movie. So what it's about, I'm going to do what I always do, which I'm going to try to give you a comprehensive overview of what it's about without spoiling. It's about this couple, and right in the beginning of the movie, this couple is having sex. And while they are, their infant child crawls out of the crib over to the window and falls out the window to his death. So this sets in motion the film where the wife it spirals into this horrible, debilitating grief. And so she's originally treated by psychiatrists, and her husband is actually played by William Dafoe. He's actually a psychotherapist, and he thinks they're over medicating her, and so he decides that he wants to try to treat her himself. So she agrees, and they engage. So this movie starts, in their apartment, and they engage. He engages in this system of psychotherapy to try to treat her. And while he does, she starts to exhibit these very sexually aggressive behavior, right? And so most of the time she's suffering with this debilitating grief, but then she has all these episodes with where this happens, and she engages in this sort of masochistic behavior with him. So it's obviously just wrought with conflict because he's trying to feed her professionally, but he's also her husband, and so this stuff is kind of hard to resist at times, right? And so it all gets very intense. And then at some point, he decides he needs to, there's sort of this nature element, and he decides he needs to treat her, wants to give her this sort of exposure therapy, right? Where he takes her, then they go up to this cabin up in the woods where she had spent the previous summer with their son working on a book that she was writing. And they go up there, and when they go up there, he tries to continue with this therapy, and the episodes of the sort of aggression, in particular sexual aggression, they increase in frequency and intensity. And then while he's up there, he discovers that when she had been there with the son, researching and working on her book, she had been exposed to a lot of this sort of religious, spiritual misogyny materials in what she was doing, and that it had a bit of an effect on her, and that it seems to she has almost sort of has this sort of internalized misogyny at this point. And so you have this sort of situation where you have where she is, she has this as I said, this sort of sexually aggressive behavior that is sort of like this maladaptive coping mechanism for her intense grief, right? That she seems to really be in the driver's seat and really be controlling these strong aggressive tendencies, and then this sort of kind of in overlaps then with this almost like sort of counter internalized misogyny that she has, and that he discovers she seems to have as a result of what she had researched up at the cabin. And so these two sort of counter these sort of counter psychological dispositions end up kind of overlapping and sort of combusting together. And I have to kind of leave it at that. I don't want to go too much further than that, but it is very interesting. These pieces are very interesting in themselves, but it's also very interesting the way you sort of have this sexualized grief that ends up colliding with this apparently internalized misogyny, and how things intensify and play out as a result of that. There's a bit more to this. There's a lot of artistic imagery. The husband sees, he has some visions of his own while they're up there. So there's psychological elements. There's religious elements. There's obviously violence and sex. There are a number of scenes. I was sitting there watching this movie by myself at night, and there were a number of instances where I actually yelled out loud. And I'm not like that. I'm not super reactive like that. If I'm sitting by myself watching a movie, I'm not going to yell out loud. I can't remember doing that ever in the past. But there was a couple times where I literally went just yelled to myself, literally like, "Oh!" because it was so shocking what happened. So, and there's right up until the end, there's a lot of imagery, and there's different readings you can have on this movie. For example, the whole movie is just him and her. They're nameless. They don't have names, and the cabin they go to is called Eden. So there's kind of I think a lot of parts of this movie that are open for some interpretation, but it's some pretty in-depth exploration that kind of like will numb your mind a little bit. That's Olive's sister whining in the back here. Hey, Riley. So it's it's it is very very intense. You need to go into it with a little bit of a stomach, strong stomach, because there are a couple of parts that are very shocking, very shocking. And I mean, basically, what we're talking about is I told you we're talking about some graphic sexually violent scenes. I am a little surprised this was not a pornographic movie. You know what I mean? There wasn't that much of it in there, but there were some very explicit scenes, like very like as explicit as it gets. And I'm a little surprised like it didn't receive an X rating actually this movie, because that you'd never see that like in a regular R movie. So definitely not one to watch with the kids, but so I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to spoil the movie. But I would definitely recommend watching this movie. It's one of those movies I finished and I said, wow, I'm kind of not sure what I watched there, and definitely not like the greatest movie I've ever seen. But I was very, very glad I watched it. It was such a unique experience. Even just the format, it's like presented in these chapters. It's just a few, but it was just very unique cinematic experience. I haven't seen a film quite like this. So had a similar experience with all of these in different ways, and we will talk about the next ones in the next two videos. So I'm going to leave that one for there. Antichrist 2009 by Lars von Trier. And let us know if you've seen this movie, and let us know what you thought about it. I should have mentioned this at the beginning. I don't think I did. I know people are gonna like jump in the comments. Lars von Trier is known. I don't know a whole lot about it, but he's known for having said some, you know, questionable things. But anyway, that this is not about him. This is about these movies that I wanted to talk about. Regardless, I'm very much just separating the art from the artist kind of person. So yeah. So let us know if you've seen this, or let us know if we piqued your interest and you're going to go watch it, or come back after you watch it and let us know what you think. I think in the U.S., I watched these different places. I think this one may have been on Canopy, or you can rent it, but I think it was available on Canopy, which is the streaming service where you just need a library card and then you can watch the movies for free on there. I think that's where I watched this one. But that's the US, so it's different everywhere else. So yeah, let us know if you have any thoughts on this one. We always love to hear from you. If you don't have anything substantive to say, you can always leave Olive a puppy emoji, because she does always like to see those. So as always, guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again very soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.